Hi everybody. So we're going to here we go. We're going to look at wireframing in our next class meeting, and here I'm going to just walk you through a little exercise to get ready so that we can have a really good workshop on Thursday as we meet to do wireframing. I'm really just going to walk you through a basic workflow for how we get to a really nice design process. It really involves 3 steps, and they're listed here on the left. And then for Thursday, for tomorrow when we meet, I'll hope that you'll come to class with the first 2 steps done. You'll see that they're not too arduous, and they should be things that you can do quickly. This will let us spend the majority of the time on the interesting task reflected in number 3, and I'll go into more detail about that when we meet. So let's walk through these. Writing user stories, creating content lists, and designing content views. So the first one is writing user stories, and I mentioned this the other day in class. It's sort of like Mad Libs. It looks like this. And here you name the audience or the user role. I want to, and then you name a goal. Now it seems kind of, simple, but it's actually a very powerful way to make sure that you're connecting with all the people that you want to reach in a particular view of information on the web. So here's an example, and this one comes from our course page. So see if you can relate to this. This has actually been tested in previous semesters, so we'll see if it still holds true. And it's an example hopefully you can relate to because it invokes the student role. So as a student in WRA 210, I want to quickly get all of the course materials I'll need for today. So that's one of the immediate reasons for visiting the course page, is you want to get ready for class, and maybe that's why you're sitting in class, or maybe it's just ahead of time. Now there are other goals that you would have as a student, and so as a designer of that course page, I don't want to stop there. It isn't just one user and one story, and in my case it's probably a couple of users. I'm one. I actually have some goals that I want met. I want to document all the things that we do, for example. And there are some other users that I could play out. In any given website, you want to think in terms of a few audience types, 1 to 3, and maybe 3 to 5 goals per view. And the reason why those numbers are the way they are is you get above those and you might want to consider a new view, or in some cases a new site altogether, or a new navigation scheme that gives that audience a particular site of its own. If you overload a site so that it's too many people, too many distinct roles trying to do too many distinct things, it gets to be a mess. Okay, so that's a user story. Work on, for your project page, is what you're going to work on. You're going to define audiences and then list those goals. For each of those, then, we start to develop the content list, and this is the actual information that is going to help a user fulfill that goal. So if we start with the goal, as a student, I want to quickly get all the course materials I'll need for today, I might have a couple of items on that content list, like links to course readings, slides, or videos relevant for the day, so that those links should be there. And importantly, I also need kind of a signpost or something to indicate that these are the fresh material, right? You'll see why when we start to zoom out and look at the other content that's going to live on the page. So I also want number 2 there, which is a heading that labels these with the date, or with some indication that, oh yeah, this is the material we're going to need for today. So that's my content list for that particular user story. For each user story, I'm going to have a list of content. And of course, once we list all the stories together and all the roles, I can have a comprehensive list of all the content I need to fit into a particular view. Now, a view like the WRA 210 page, which we'll see in a minute, the course page, is actually a fairly information-dense view, because the goals you have take a lot of information to fulfill. But we'll see that it's still okay to do that as long as they keep them nice and organized. Step 3 then is design the view. So when we design the view, we're really talking about making a mock-up or a wireframe. So this is that wireframe stage. To design good wireframes, though, we need that list of content, because what we're trying to do is create a layout for the content in your list that allows users to achieve their goals. So you see, we need the goals first, we need the content second, and now we can start positioning it like little building blocks, really, on the page. So here's a sample that actually recreates the basic structure of the top half above the fold of the WRA 210 page. And you can see over here in blue are the bits of content, or the space reserved for content that fulfills the goal that we just talked about, which is grabbing all the material that you'll need for class on a particular day. In gray, we have some other roles that I didn't spell out here, but we could sort of reverse engineer those if you want. We'll talk about that in class a little bit tomorrow. So let's take a look now, before we go back to what you have to do. Let's just take a brief look at the WRA 210 page for just a second, and we'll see these live implemented. So here's the now familiar course page, and you can see today in 210, that's our label, and you can see the links. Actually, these are links to yesterday, but soon this video will be up there, and then the video. So what this does is it gives you, as a student user, you can reliably check every day before class, or usually the 24 hours or so before we meet. And this top left corner just below the nav is a reliable place to find everything you need for that day. So that's how I'm helping with this layout to achieve that particular goal. And as I mentioned, we have some other content on the page. Some content above the fold, recently in 210, your pages. And then we have some content below the fold here too. If you wanted to see this content as a list before it's laid out, we can talk a little bit about why I've laid it out the way I have. But it's also useful to practice what Stolle calls the reading by breaking method, to see just how I'm starting with the content and then pouring it into a layout to sort of help the user achieve their goals of filtering all of this information. So here's what the information would look like if we didn't have any styles associated with it. So now what I'm doing is I'm browsing my same page. You can see it's the same page up here. But I'm looking at it without the style sheet, right? So we see it more or less as that list of content that we just talked about. There's a title and the navigation up here. And then we see the today content, the embedded video, the recently, your pages, modules, and then resources for web authors. It's really a big list of lists. Now we could debate if it's useful in this format or not. It's not terribly unuseful, and in fact, part of what this view does is it helps to make sure that if you're viewing it on a phone or on a tablet, it still holds up pretty well. But this view helps to put some of these things in immediate context. So for example, today and recently kind of speak to each other. You can rely on the stuff that is here today is going to be over here tomorrow or the next time we meet. So it doesn't go away in case you need to refer back to it. The stuff as it moves down this list, if we need it to be durable, it actually goes down here, resources for web authors. So it doesn't ever go away, it just kind of migrates so that this stays current and this becomes a list of recent materials and this becomes a list of evergreen or durable materials that we'll need to refer back to on several occasions. Okay, so that's a little bit about the logic of this layout and how it evolved based on the student user stories. At this point, I want to take us a look back to our PowerPoint and talk a little bit about what you can do for tomorrow. Just two things. Write your user stories for your project page and think about two users or audiences that you want to appeal to. Me, the instructor, audience, and then peer learners. Then make a content list. We're going to use that content list to sort of brainstorm some new layouts that you might want to try using that wireframe method. All right. Tomorrow we'll also talk about, when we do wireframes, what that implies about the structure of your HTML page, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So hopefully this is a useful workflow that you'll come back to. Writing user stories, making content lists, and designing content views. That's the essence of building usable and useful websites.